The Ukrainians have been playing ball. They did agree to that ceasefire 5 weeks ago. They would start to use the stick rather than the carrot of concessions that they have.
Putin has been holding out for over a month on an unconditional ceasefire.
Okay, another rather crazy one to cover quickly. The Trump administration. The Trump administration, who promised an end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict before even taking office, is now signaling that they fully will just walk away from the talks altogether, allowing Russia to continue their, what's bordering on the line of genocide. So let's hop right into this story. As soon as you hit that like button, of course, because we really appreciate it. It helps us out a ton, and it only takes a second. So let's hop right in.
Have you heard any clarity as to what Rubio means by moving on, and or is it your sense that, obviously you could hear the frustration in his voice, that this is a negotiating tactic?
It certainly does put pressure on all sides, and it's not clear which way he's aiming that pressure. Is it more on Putin, who's been holding out for over a month on an unconditional ceasefire that Ukraine signed up to more than a month ago?
Very briefly, let's stop to talk about this because it is super important. Trump and MAGA went on like a 2-week tour painting Ukraine and Zelensky as the bad guy, right? The aggressors who didn't want peace, even signaling that they somehow started the war, only for Zelensky to come to the table and immediately sign the ceasefire, which was another talking point from MAGA saying he wouldn't do it, where Putin is now showing his hand by refusing to negotiate. What can Trump and MAGA say now? And the last thing I'll point out before we continue, how does giving a deadline put any pressure on Russia? If they just wait it out, they can keep taking Ukraine without U.S. involvement, which just benefits them. It's practically just playing into their hand.
Whether it's more pressure on Russia or Ukraine, certainly he could have put pressure on Russia saying, if you don't go along with this in the next few days, we'll impose more sanctions, we'll impose more tariffs. That is something that Trump has said. We don't know what Rubio had said in a conversation yesterday with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Certainly there could have been that implication that they would start to use the stick rather than the carrot of concessions that they have made until this point. And certainly the U.S. is expecting concessions from both sides. So both sides will be feeling this pressure now. I think we could expect to see something from the Russian side, something incremental, because they have shown a willingness to try to get back into Trump's good graces. And let's remember, the Ukrainians have been playing ball. They did agree to that ceasefire 5 weeks ago, while the Russians have added conditions. They said that sanctions need to be lifted. So they've been going along with this.
I think it's super easy. It's really clear how he could put actual pressure on Russia. You just tell them to come to the table and negotiate, or we will renege on negotiations and instead back Ukraine until they win, or Russia does. And at that point, it'll be under far less terms than what Russia will get now. You threaten sanctions out the ass, maybe make a unilateral coalition of countries, or just utilize like the UN, the unilateral coalition that already exists, and you make it more wide-ranging in a way that can affect them, not just, American sanctions, because we don't trade that. We trade billions, but like in the context of trade, that's not a lot. And you can put pressure on the actual aggressors in this war through doing that. The only country not willing to cease fire or negotiate peace, the country that also started the war. You don't say, yeah, we'll walk away, so it'll just be you and the smaller country if you don't make peace, because that essentially means Russia can just continue playing hardball and then get anything they want. So why would they concede anything?
The guy for the Middle East. But President Trump, according to sources we've talked to in the White House and close to Witkoff, was impressed with those early wins that he had with the ceasefire and hostage release deal. Of course, many of that teed up by the Biden administration, but he expanded what Witkoff was in charge of. He's now the point person for Russia in the Ukraine war. He's also, of course, the point person for Iran in the last 2 weeks, sitting down with the Iranian foreign minister. And we've gotten a sense of how Witkoff actually prepares for those meetings. He's not looking for these really thick briefing books that typically diplomats would look for, State Department briefings. He looks for impromptu meetings, I'm told, sources close to Witkoff. He looks for his intelligence briefings that he has been getting increasingly so. But it's also that connectivity that he has to Trump, that he really relies on to prepare for these engagements. And that is one of the reasons that you talk to people inside the White House, you talk to people outside the White House. They're now comparing Steve Witkoff to the role that Jared Kushner.
This is yet another person with no qualifications for the role that he was given, let alone for the role it's being expanded to, where we're also just seeing this play out with the disaster of the Israel-Hamas negotiations, where Israel has relentlessly been breaking their end of the deal, or the failure to acquire, and by the way, might I mention Trump's going as far to now talk about using U.S. troops to annex Gaza MAGA to get this deal done, or the failure to acquire any success on the Russia-Ukraine conflict that they again promised to have settled before day one. Now, having to militarily threaten Iran, where I'd like to remind you all, the reason that we don't have a deal with Iran right now is because Trump pulled us out of that good deal. I mean, Trump came in selling the idea that the world was on fire and he would fix it, and then he came in and literally set it ablaze. He has now a real estate guy trying to negotiate with sycophants and dictators across the world to show you what kind of position we're in, the incompetence that we literally put in office. But merit, guys, merit. At least they're not black. I mean, or trans. Oh.